Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming out today. It's a pleasure to be here and to talk to you about cultivating a leadership culture within companies. And Joe, thank you very much for that great introduction. Greatly appreciated. So, my background is leadership. I've had the title of president or higher in front of my name for the past 30 years. I've run a global company. I've served on a lot of boards, both for-profit and non-profit boards, and I've watched a lot of leaders operate and be successful. And I've seen some leaders who are not so successful. So what I'm going to share with you today are my learnings over that period of time, actually over the past 10 years, when I stepped down as CEO of PQ Corporation, serving on boards, and just my observations about what it takes to cultivate a leadership culture within a firm. That starts, of course, with the leader. And so let's talk about what it takes to be an effective leader. Effective leaders, first of all, set the right tone at the top and the right corporate or institutional culture. Now, what do I mean by tone at the top? Tone at the top are the ethical standards by which the leader will hold himself or herself or the company to various standards. And the last thing you want to do is see yourself on the front page of the Wall Street Journal in a negative light. And so everybody watches the leader, everybody watches the CEO. And the way the CEO sets the standard is extremely important in terms of the ethical compass for the company. People read all the time in the press about companies that get into trouble. You don't want to have that occur. And with today's social media, your reputation can be destroyed within minutes, a reputation that can take years to build. And so the tone at the top by the leader is extremely important in terms of guiding the company in the right direction. The corporate or institutional culture is how folks deal with each other within the company, and with those folks they deal with outside the company. And we're going to talk about that as we go through today's remarks. People are known by their culture, and when lists are published of the great companies to work for, it's usually tone at the top by the leader and the culture that the leader establishes within that company that determine whether or not you're going to make that list. The leader needs to select the right people. I interview a lot of folks for C-suite jobs, and I only ask 5 questions. And those questions are this. By the time that individual gets to me, they've already been vetted for their experience and for their knowledge and for their track record. And so I get to see them at the very end, but I have 5 questions I ask them. The first question is, tell me about tone at the top and corporate culture. What do those words mean to you? And we talk about that. And you gain a lot by hearing the responses of what the leader is going to say. And you can make a judgment of how they're going to be effective or not effective for the position that you're interviewing them for. The second question I ask is, tell me about how you're going to hire the very, very best people below you so that they, in fact, can hire the very best people below them. And you hear them talk about their philosophy on leadership, the kind of people they want to hire, the fact that they need to hire the very best people actually better than they. And that gives you a comfort that they're going to hire folks that are not yes people, that tell the leader what they think. And that will determine by a great degree whether that unit's going to be successful or not in terms of the leadership. The next question I ask is, tell me about how you're going to establish a leadership and management culture within your unit. And you can learn a lot from that individual by just hearing about their leadership style and their management style. The next question I ask is, how are you going to staff the unit below you with the very best people and have them achieve great things, and how you're going to motivate them and inspire them to do the right thing. And you'll get responses which will indicate the type of organization and the type of leadership that they're going to use to lead that unit. And after that conversation, you can tell whether or not that individual is the right person for the job. And I'll make a recommendation based upon how they respond. Leaders always need to share the vision and the mission of the unit, of the organization that they lead. People won't know where to go unless they know where you want to take them. And so for them to follow you, they need to know where you want to go. When I became CEO of PQ Corporation, we established the vision and mission with my team, and we went out and talked with every operating unit around the world in terms of what that vision and mission was and how they fit within that vision and mission. And I had a lot of response from the folks we were talking with that this is the first time anybody's ever told us what our job was within the company. I remember a meeting that we had with one of our large groups. Their job was to generate cash flow so that other units within the company could grow. Nobody's ever told them that before. And so they knew what their job was, which was to generate cash. And people then can rally around that and move forward based upon what you expected of them to grow the company. Cultivate a sense of ownership. This was probably the most important lesson I learned, and it was taught to me by an hourly worker when I was president of our Canadian company in Canada, in Toronto. We had a small unit which was out of capacity, and we wanted to increase the capacity of the unit. Rather than calling the engineers, and this was a very small project, engineers are only really want to work on things that are over $1 million, and we knew this project was going to be less than $1 million. So we called in the operator of the unit, Luigi Paolini, and we said to him, Luigi, we want you to tell us how you think we should expand the capacity. You've worked on this unit for the last 10 years. And the first question he said to us was, well, why don't you call in the engineers? And we told him why. And we said, you know more about this unit than anybody, so let us know how you think we should expand the unit. Well, he said, I'll do it, but I need help from the mechanical department. So we said, okay, pick your guy, pick your mechanic. Well, he picks Don McNeil, who was the best mechanic in the plant, but extremely negative with respect to labor management relationships. He came from the trade union tradition of England, of the UK, and he was a negative opinion leader within the plant. And so I'm thinking, oh no, this is not going to work really well. But Luigi picked his guy, so we said, okay, you can use Don McNeil. And so we go out and talk with Don right after Luigi talks with him, and Don tells us, well, I'm going to do this, but not for you, but for Luigi, my friend. We said, Don, that's okay, just do it. And so about 4 weeks later, they come forward and they present the scope on how they want to increase the capacity. And Don actually cost estimated the unit out, the work out. He cost estimated out at $260,000. And I'm looking at the plant manager who is with me when they're making the presentation. And he looks at me and I look at him, and I kind of nod at the plant manager, and he says to both guys, okay, you guys are now responsible for actually managing the project. Well, that's not our job. Get a project manager to do it. We said, well, you guys created the scope, and you should do the project. And they said, okay, we'll do it. But Don says, I'm not doing it for you, I'm doing it for Luigi, my friend. We had asked them to increase the capacity by 50% and do a couple of other things with the unit during the capacity increase work. And 2 months later, the unit is finished. It's up and running. Within the first week, we hit 50% increase in capacity. Within the second week, we're at 62% increase in capacity. And the unit's running just fine. Well, they brought the project in at $250,000, $10,000 less than the original estimate by Don. And all four of us changed fundamentally. Don McNeil is now telling his fellow union members within the plant, management trusted me for what I could do with my mind in addition to what I could do with my hands. And they're okay. So he went from being a negative opinion leader to being a positive opinion leader. And all of a sudden, everybody's thinking, well, management's pretty good, so we want to work with them. Luigi changed in the following way. I'm walking through the plant with a visitor about a week later after the unit's up and running, and Luigi says to me, I'll take the visitor through my unit. I said, okay, take him through the unit. So he does that, and then we go and visit the other 4 units within the plant. And about a week later, I'm walking through the plant. Luigi calls me over and says, you know what I did last week with the visitor? I said, well, what'd you do? He said, I took I took him through the plant and showed him the plant. I said, well, he says, you know why I did that? I said, no. He said, I did it because this is my plant, not your plant, this is my plant. We created a sense of ownership in Luigi. And I'm thinking, oh my God. He just taught me something so valuable. When you do things with the people below you that create a sense of ownership within them, great things happen. And that governed my management leadership style for the rest of my career at PQ, and it still does today. So you want to create a sense of ownership in folks in terms of what they do. And when you do that, great things happen. Great things happen. You want to embrace continuous improvement. Businesses never stand still. They always move forward. And when you create a sense of continuous improvement in people, things improve. And this occurred to me, and I learned this lesson early on while president of our Canadian company. We were building a small unit in Edmonton, Alberta, and I cost estimated the unit out at $2.5 million, and the project did not have a return on investment. I think it was 8%, and our cost of capital was 10, so we usually approve projects at 15. And so I presented the project to our president, the CEO of the parent company. I said, Paul, I can't take this to the board. We only have an 8% return. He said, well, tell me about the project. And I told him about the project. And he said, well, can you run it with 0 people? I said, well, Paul, we have it staffed with 5 people. How are we going to run it with 0 people? He said, well, can you run it with 0 people? I said, no. He said, okay. Can you run it with 1 person? I said, no, I don't think so. He said, we'll get to that in a minute. Can you run it with 2 people? I said, well, I guess technically we could. He said, I want you to go back. I want you to look at the scope of the plant, every aspect of the scope. Take everything out that you don't need, get the capital down, change every paradigm that you've ever had about building one of these plants, and come back to me and see what the return is. And I want you to do it with 2 people, but not 2 people in one shift. 1 person on the first shift, 1 person on the second shift. So I want you to run it with 1 person per shift. Went back to my staff in Toronto, and I explained what Paul wanted us to do, which was to break every paradigm that we had. And we took the capital down from $2.5 million to $1.5 million by doing many, many things which we never thought of doing, but the plant would run with the new design. We took the people down to 1 person per shift. There was so much controversy within the company that we couldn't run it with one person per shift, that we had to add a 3rd person for the economics, in case we ever had to add that person later on. So we included it in the economics. We brought the project in at a 20% return, presented it to the board approved it. It turned out to be the most successful project we've ever done. We hired people, not normal chemical operators, but people from the petroleum industry who were used to working by themselves up in the upper north of Canada, very independent people, paid them a small amount more. And the project was very successful with 1 person per shift. And we added a 3rd person when we went to the 3rd shift. We never added a person, doubled up on a shift. And after many, many years, we recalculated the return on the project. It was 38%. So we went from a project of 8% to 38%. Why did we do that? Because we thought about continuously improving every aspect of that plant. And that permeated the entire company. And we had a philosophy that everybody is empowered to look at everything all the time within their purview to continuously improve. And we empowered people that if they didn't need to get additional approval above, they were empowered to make that improvement. If they needed approval elsewhere, like above them, they were empowered to go and ask for that permission. And so the culture changed from one in which everybody said, well, that's the way we've always done it, to, well, that's not really right. We need to look at how we can move forward and do it better in the future and continuously improve. And so if you're going up against competition and you're doing continuous improvement and they're not, in the long run you're going to win and they're going to die. If they're doing it and you're not, they're going to win and you're going to die. And if you both do it, the company that does it the best will win over the long term. And so that became a fundamental cultural norm within our company, continuous improvement. And it happens all over the world, all over the world. And so this today, if you read the literature, all successful companies have a philosophy of continuous improvement. because you need to move forward. You just can't stay still. You need to move forward. Effective leaders are not a tyrant. How many of you work for, I shouldn't ask that question. I shouldn't ask how many work for tyrants. That's a bad question to ask. I used to work for one at PQ Corporation. Tom Goodowitz, my good friend here, knows what I'm talking about. Tyrants will suck the air and the blood out of everything. They will just kill an organization. And they'll kill the people below them in terms of depowering them and actually making them into robots so they only want to do things which please the tyrant. I wrote an article about this about 2 months ago, and I went to my editor at the Philadelphia Business Journal and I said, Craig, I want to run an article about a terrorist that I used to work for. He said, you can't call the person a terrorist because of the connotation today with ISIS and Al-Qaeda and so forth. I said, well, what should I call him? He said, call him a tyrant. So that's what I called this person in my article. I nearly left the company. I was this close to leaving the company, but I finally learned how to deal with him, which was to push back and just not take his abuse. And I had enough political capital within the company where he couldn't fire me. And so I learned how to deal with him. Had I left the company, the company would have been deprived of a future CEO, because that's what I became 10 years later. And so it's extremely important for all of us not to tolerate tyrants if they work for us. And it's really a sign of bad leadership, poor leadership, if we let tyrants below us terrorize their folks below them. And so they need to go. They need to go. I eventually was promoted to the president of our Canadian company, then promoted to a higher level, back to corporate headquarters. And I fired the guy. The unit that he led, those folks danced in the halls for days. They were so happy he was gone. And I put the very, very best person within the company to lead that unit and to help this unit recover. It took over a year for these people to feel empowered about making decisions and to have them come out of their shell. So it took a long, long time for these people to operate normally. That's how much damage a tyrant can do. And so as leaders, we should never tolerate tyrants below us because they do huge damage to the folks below them. And of course, effective leaders grow future leaders. It's our job to do so. So leadership doesn't just occur at the very top, it occurs throughout the organization, all the way down through the organization. And it's our job as leaders to make sure these people grow and they can replace us as we move forward or leave the company. And I've heard a lot of comments over time where people say, well, if I develop leaders, I'm going to lose them, they're going to go elsewhere. Well, that's okay. We should be proud that we promote people, that people get promoted and leave the company and get better jobs. First of all, you have a friend somewhere else. And that's really a feather in your cap that you've done that. And if you have people below them that can backfill that position, that's what you're supposed to do. We're supposed to grow leaders. That's our job. And the benefit that our company gets from having those leaders in place is huge versus not growing any kind of leadership within the company. That's a bad culture. You want to grow leaders, and you want to teach them and lead by example so they know what a good leader looks like. It's a very important part of the job. And of course, finally, effective leaders achieve results, which means that the leader is proactive, has a bias for action, is focused, and they lead their unit, and their unit achieves results. And over the 5 years I was CEO of my company, we had taken earnings from 14 million. We had been on a plateau of $23 million of earnings. We knew our largest customer didn't like our pricing, and they were going to drop that, force us to drop our price, which is what we did to keep the business. And so our base was $14 million in my first year as being CEO. In 5 years, we took that $14 million to $43 million of earnings. This was through the decade, or the 5 years of 9/11 and the terrible recession of 2002 and 3. After the first year, after cleaning up the balance sheet, we never had a down quarter, ever. And I didn't achieve that. The leaders and the people who managed our units around the world did that. And all I did was set the right tone at the top and the right culture. And within that culture and tone at the top, they achieved those results. And so we moved from a company that was a fourth quartile performance company in 1999 to a first quartile performance company in the year 2004, the year before we sold the company. And this was measured against the 17 peer companies that we had in our peer group, all public companies, so we knew what their data was, even though we were private. And we did that through tone at the top, the right corporate culture, putting the right leaders in place, doing continuous improvement, getting rid of tyrants, and helping grow leaders. And it's really not a magical formula. It's kind of common sense, but you need the people at the right level to do this all the time. And it's actually not hard to do it. All you just need to do is to follow the formula. So let's talk about universal advice. I do a lot of speaking in front of classes. I've done 10 Wharton classes at the Wharton School, 10 MBA classes at Wharton. I've done a number of classes at Drexel. I speak in front of employee groups. I give a speech in front of the graduating medical class at the College of Medicine each year. And I always end up with this universal advice. And it's valid for those folks just starting out in their career, and it's valid for people that have been in their careers and that are mid-career, and it's valid for everybody. So the first piece of advice is you want to develop a track record of success. You want to develop a track record internally so that you get the next promotion, or if you leave the company, you have a track record to point to, because your future company, the future employers, your future employers will want to know, well, what have you done? What have you accomplished? You want to communicate all the time. Whether you're an individual contributor, or whether you're a leader of a unit, or whether you're the CEO, you're constantly communicating, you're constantly selling your ideas. So you have to be effective in how you do that. And if you are effective, people will follow you. If you can convince them that what you want to do is the right path. If you can't convince them and you just order them to do it, it's not going to work out real well. They need to feel ownership in what you want to do, and the path that you want to follow, and the vision and mission that you want to achieve. So you're constantly communicating, no matter where you are in the organizational chart. You want to differentiate yourself in your company. I have many people come to me and say, well, what do I need to do to get my next job? And my first question to them is, well, how have you differentiated yourself vis-a-vis your peers? Well, I really haven't done that. I haven't thought about that. Well, you go for a job, both either internally or externally, and the first question that's going to be asked is, well, what have you done? And the person who is doing the hiring will think, well, how do you compare with another person who's going up for that job? So you have to differentiate. What have you done that other people haven't done? What value do you bring to the next position? When it's time to determine what people are going to get for their annual salary increases, for their raises, the individual who's doing this, the boss, is going to determine, well, how am I going to rank order these folks? And what individual has done something that differentiates themselves versus everybody else? And they're the ones that are going to get the larger raise. So you're always differentiating yourself, always doing something new and different, always improving your company and yourself, so you're more valuable to the company. You always continuously improve. It goes back to my example of just a few moments ago. Do something that always continuously improves your company, your unit, your organization, yourself. Because once you stop, the world will pass you by. You want to develop contacts in a personal network. Very, very important. You want to be out and about talking with people for a couple of reasons. One, you'll get ideas from people. You get a chance to hear what they're doing, they get a chance to hear what you're doing, and ideas bounce back and forth, and you'll walk away with something new and different to think about. I write a weekly column on leadership. I need to come up with a unique story every single week. The way I get that is by talking to people. And every day I get an idea about what to write about. And I put it on the list, and then I rank order what I'm going to write about the next day. It's great to hear what other people are doing within their company because it gives you ideas about what you should do within your company. You should always be networking. If you're going for the next position, you're not going to get, the only way you get that past your initial entry position out of college is through your network. And so by developing a huge network of people that matter to you and people that you matter to, when you're looking for a job, another position, you might mention it and will say, gee, I know somebody who I want to introduce you to. And without that list, you're going to have trouble getting your next position. And so you have to build a very, very strong network where they know what matters to you and you know what matters to them because they're going to help you. They're going to help you move forward. You want to protect your integrity and reputation. Never do anything you don't want to see on the front page of the Wall Street Journal or the Business Journal or the Philadelphia Inquirer, or that you don't want to testify to in a court of law and in a deposition. Never do anything, because the only thing we all have is our integrity and our reputation. Because once you lose that, you really can't get it back. As a CEO, you can run a company that goes through bankruptcy, and depending upon the reason, the next year you can get a new job. You lose your reputation or integrity, you lost everything for a long, long time, maybe forever. So never do anything. Never do anything that will jeopardize that. And if you're asked to do it by your boss, don't do it. Even if it could mean your job, you'd rather not work there, you'd rather not be there, because once you do it, you're on a slippery slope. So you have to maintain your integrity, you have to maintain your reputation, and you have to go to bed at night feeling that you've done that. And so what you want to do is you want to focus on the first 5 and protect the last. You want to protect your integrity and your reputation. Extremely important. So you want to follow the cardinal rule. You want to lead like you would like to be led. And you do this, and 95% of everything you do will be okay. When I terminate somebody, and I've terminated a lot of people, I never tell them, you're fired, you're terminated today. I never use those words. Why? I wouldn't like to hear it. So we sit down and I say, we're going to part company because of these reasons. It's not personal, it's business. We're going to part company. We're going to part company in a couple of weeks, so go home, tell your family, let's talk tomorrow about how we're going to do that, how we're going to announce it to the organization, the announcement that we're going to write. I will help you by putting you into my network, and I'll help you get the next job. And when you do it, you're basically parting company, and the person maintains their dignity. You never want to destroy a person's dignity. Now, of course, if you're doing with somebody that's going to hurt you tomorrow, then of course they need to leave today, and the conversation's a lot different. But that's very rare. And so you want to do it as if you were the person receiving the bad news. And if you do that, you'll make friends forever. And the folks that I've treated that way, I've kept them in my network, we've talked. A couple of individuals that burnt the bridge, I didn't help, and it wasn't to their best interest. So never, ever, ever burn your bridges when you leave a company. Not necessary, and emotionally you may want to feel that you want to do that, but don't do it. It's not going to help you, because the boss who is terminating you, you're going to need them for a reference. And so you want to just do it on a very professional level. I give a speech each year to the graduating class of the College of Medicine, because I was chairman of the board of that unit within Drexel. And I get up there and I say to them, standing in front of you is a 1969 chemical engineering graduate of this great university that just happens to be the chairman of the board of your College of Medicine. Now, how's an engineer become chairman of the board of a College of Medicine? And then I'm silent for maybe 3 or 4 seconds, and there's a murmur in the room. And I say to them, I can look back on my career from the day after my commencement, and I can look at my career path. And it wasn't a straight line. I can look at the dots on the ground that represent the path, and it's kind of zigzagged. And what I did was I got out of my comfort zone. I took assignments that I wasn't really 100% prepared for, but I knew I could learn as I went along. I took risks. Sometimes I failed, but I got back up and I did it again. And over a period of time, you're asked to do various things. So I joined the board of Drexel 15 years ago in 2000. I became chairman of the finance committee. I was asked to do that, and I did that for 11 years. And eventually they asked me to chair the medical school board, which was a complete surprise. It was not on my radar. So if you look at my career, since the day after commencement, it's zigzagged. And I say to them, tomorrow is the first day after your commencement. So how are you going to manage your career? If you want it to be a straight line and you want to do the same thing every day, that's fine. But for those of you that don't, that want to get challenged every day, go out, be out of your comfort zone, take assignments that are not exactly where you are today, but you'll learn how to do. Take risks. You'll fail, you'll pick yourself up, and you'll move on. And someday you may be invited to address a group like I am and give them advice on their career. And so it's up to you. And so that's the advice I leave the graduating medical school students. And the last year, as I'm walking through the lobby of the Kimmel Center, and all the parents are shooting their kids in their caps and gowns, I had 3 parents come up to me and say, "I hope my kid listened to you today." I said, well, maybe they did listen and maybe they didn't, but it doesn't matter as long as they're happy and content in what they do. But if they want a really interesting career and a really interesting life and to wake up to challenges, they need to get out of their comfort zone and do something new and different. So with that, I'm going to conclude, and I'm going to open it up for questions. Thank you very much for your attention, and please ask away. So thank you.